My dad was an alcoholic, and a lot of my childhood was spent kind of managing that. My struggle as a 4-year-old is like, do I hold the responsibility of saving his life, or do I hold the responsibility of, being loyal to my mom? Child won't make their parent the problem, because if I psychologically made my parent the problem, then I'm kind of screwed. Like, who's going to take care of me? I'm not a good enough daughter, or like, I'm not good enough or smart enough or whatever for dad to stop drinking.
Welcome to the I Decide Darlings podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Lisa. We are moms, wives, best friends, entrepreneurs, and authors of the book, I Decide, the happy little guide to living your best life. Pull up a chair, grab a glass of wine, and get ready to talk all things health, success, loss, money, family, and everything in between. These two besties won't leave anything off the table.
So get ready to laugh, cry, hear the tips, tools, and stories to give you the success you crave, the life you adore, and the future you deserve. You are listening to the I Decide podcast.
Welcome back, darlings, to the I Decide podcast. As always, I am Erin Lopez.
And I'm Lisa Cox. Welcome.
Welcome back, everybody. And we have some good stuff. She may be from Houston, so I'm a little excited. But I have the honor and the pleasure to introduce to you all today our guest, Tammy. And Tammy Chow is a trauma healing and soul alignment coach who works with women to heal their nervous systems so they can find energetic alignment and share their gifts with the world, which I love that already. While her work incorporates principles from the somatic experiencing, eating psychology, IFS, and compassionate inquiry, her practice is greatly informed by her own personal healing as a child of an alcoholic who experienced sexual, religious, and racial trauma throughout her childhood. She struggled with IBS, bulimia, body dysmorphia, suicidal thoughts, severe depression, and anxiety as symptoms of her unprocessed trauma. Gathering her own healing and work with clients, she passionately believes that the body has an innate capacity to heal itself, given the right conditions and tools. Tammy teaches women how to healthily move difficult emotions, self-regulate, access their inner wisdom, and follow their joy. She is on a mission to help women reclaim the sovereignty that is their birthright. Tammy, welcome to the I Decide Darlings podcast. It was an honor reading that, but it's more so an honor to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. And we have so much to cover today. But before we do that, and we definitely want to hear about the somatic trauma work that you do, but we would love to know who Tammy is and take us back to a little bit of your journey and where you are then and where you are today.
Yeah, so it's funny because I can't really talk about where I am now without talking about just really personal parts of my upbringing. And I never thought that having that out in the open would be part of my resume, but here we are. So I grew up, I'm first generation to immigrant parents who are from Hong Kong. And I grew up in an alcoholic household. My dad was an alcoholic, and a lot of my childhood was spent kind of managing that. And, when my parents moved from New York to Houston in order to establish a better, hopefully more successful life, my mom started working full-time selling furniture. And so I was tasked sort of with the responsibility of, in my 4-year-old mind, making sure my dad didn't drink so he wouldn't die. Mm-hmm. And so thus began this like internal struggle of feeling like I was taking care of him or watching him at all times. And then also holding on to this really huge tension within my body of, well, he's also lying to me. He's telling me he's drinking apple juice when it's beer. And do I tell mom? Because if I tell mom, then she's going to divorce him. And then if she divorces him, then I've heard that he's going to die. So then my struggle as a 4-year-old is like, do I hold the responsibility of saving his life, or do I hold the responsibility of, being loyal to my mom? And I
Wow.
also share a lot about my relationship with my mom growing up as well, which was not easy, just from everyone's trauma being passed on and perpetuated and it not being conscious. So I really feel, and I love my parents, even if I'm taking some space right now. It's so messy and it's complicated for everybody, these dynamics. And yeah, my path from that, and then, being bulimic for 10 years, like just severely depressed, anxious, going into countless disastrous relationships and experiencing quite a bit of sexual trauma and overcoming all of that to finally be able to have a voice and to help other women has been my journey. And now I find myself really, like, my work has evolved even more from that intro where it's I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner as well as a body temple dance facilitator, and kind of helping people find like the holy trinity of attachment, which is secure attachment with ourselves, with God, and others. When I say God, I mean the universe, spirit, goddess, whatever spirituality is to you. And with like a huge focus on attachment trauma, because for where we are now in our generation, that's what a lot of us experienced. And not that it wasn't part of it, but not as much of, say, like the survival trauma that my parents experienced, but more of this like covert relational stuff that we can't really make sense of when we're kids.
I have the hardest time hearing 4 years old. I know you probably saying that is still probably something that's hard to talk about, because when I think about a 4-year-old, I first of all, I don't really have memories of being 4. I don't. And you had not only memories, but you have trauma, and you had so much responsibility given to you at 4 years old. And that's what makes me, with my mom's heart, my daughters are grown. But that really hurts to hear you as a beautiful young woman say that it started at 4. And so when it was going on, did you know, like, besides the fact and the feelings, this is my responsibility to take care of my dad, did you have anger towards your mom, like, mom is putting me in this position? Or did that ever come out for you? Because I feel kind of angry that she put you in that position too. Or that a woman would put their 4-year-old, not necessarily your mom, but a woman would put their 4-year-old in a position of all that responsibility at 4 years old. That to me feels wrong.
Right. And I just don't know that like she had the tools or the knowledge or anything, as a mom. And because my grandmother immigrated with her when she was 10 years old to the States. And so that was like leaving a country in order to like be able to survive, and I don't know that my grandmother relationally knew, like my mom kind of grew up starting around the age of 4, running around the streets and starting to like work in factories and stuff. So I just don't think she was equipped at all. And for me at that age, and I don't think, well, actually, like most of the time when we're that age, our primal need is attachment. Well, we have 2 needs, authenticity and attachment, and we'll usually choose attachment because we need our parents to survive. So that means that I won't a child won't make their parent the problem, because if I psychologically made my parent the problem, then I'm kind of screwed. Like, who's going to take care of me? So instead, that's when we start to create all of those limiting beliefs and make ourselves the problem. Like, I'm not a good enough daughter, or like, I'm not good enough or smart enough or whatever for dad to stop drinking. That was like the internal reality for me. And, for at the time, my mom was the completely safe parent, so I idolized her and put her on a pedestal so she could do no wrong. And it wasn't until maybe like 5 or 6 years ago or 7 that I really started to go into the deep trauma healing and realizing, whoa, this is like so layered. Um, and all the ways that I was also severely affected by, my mom, and not wanting to blame her because I have such compassion for just them not having the tools, but acknowledging that that had a severe impact on me for sure.
And, it goes back to that saying of we don't know what we don't know. Like she was doing the best that she could do in that
Yeah,
situation, and
definitely.
so I think there's something to be said for that. But do you think that you going down that path, like even with your bulimia, was that a control thing?
Yeah.
Like you could control what you put in and what came out of your mouth. So
Mhm.
I almost wonder if that was, a control, like that was one thing. You couldn't control your dad, you couldn't control the drinking, but you could control that, whether that be right or healthy. Do you think that
Mhm.
was part of it?
Definitely, like, that control was a huge one, and also I think, like, this weird desperate cry for help that was silent, almost like the thoughts in my mind were like, if I'm, like, almost dead or go to the hospital or, like, if my heart stops, like, maybe they'll finally see that I'm suffering because, everything was around my dad's suffering
Yeah.
that I was, sort of invisible. And then the other part that I talk about and teach about is like suppressed rage. And I had no idea about this emotion in myself until I started working with my first somatic practitioner, Madison Neese. And after I had an intro call with her, she was like, "Have you worked on your rage?" And of course, I was like, perfect good girl, like Houston, Texas, like, and I was like, "Rage? I'm not a very angry person." Like, and I had done so much healing on my own by then. But as our work evolved, I realized like what actually happened was like all those moments that I suppressed of like, our authenticity is just life force energy. Our rage is just life force energy that tells us that we care about something, our boundaries have been crossed. And so I re-educate about rage all the time. And so all of those micro moments that I had an instinct, that's like energy revving up in the body, adrenaline and cortisol that got squashed by needing to cater to everybody else's needs. For me, looking back, bulimia was honestly the only way that I knew to actually self-regulate back then. So it was like this binge and purge cycle of this like catharsis of like rage with nowhere to go. So I took it out on myself and like could only actually truly feel my feelings in that process, like that addictive process.
Did anybody identify any of the things that were going on with you? Did anybody else, any other outsider identify your struggles? Or was it all you learning what was going on with yourself? And then I want to hear about the process of how you started to heal and what age that was and stuff. But I'm just curious, as a little girl, did anyone else see this happening to you besides your mom and dad who
Or
weren't?
did they?
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I was an only child, and, I think at school, I just had such a perfect like, it was even my mom, when we have talked about this later, she will say, like, "Oh, I always thought you were just, like, the perfect child." And, obviously now we know it's a fawn response, like, it's an extreme fawn response, and so maybe the only ones that knew were like my high school boyfriend or my best friend growing up, um, and maybe at the time, I don't know if you guys know what Zanga is, but it was like the online journal blog at the time. And that's where you like write like these discreet cries for help, or you like talk about your crush, but don't name them, but they're going to read it. And so I would like write these like super emo posts, about my feelings. And so I think that my friends thought I was emotional, but I don't think I even had the words to explain what was happening at the time.
did everyone else, because like you said, your mom thought you were this perfect child without any problems, not problems, but did the rest of everybody else around you think that of your family probably? Like did they know that he had a drinking issue or that you had this, we always say you never know what's happening inside their home. Were
Right.
you all the perfect trio?
Yeah, it seemed like that, and that seems like such like, I just had a conversation with somebody about that recently of, like, how harmful it is that we just try to portray this perfect family image, and that's so much of the pain. So yeah, I think it was hard because when we were with my friends or we were out, like, it was fun and, festive and, people knew that my dad was an alcoholic, but my mom would always say, if the waiter was offering a drink or something, or, she would say, "Oh, no, he's an alcoholic. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic," because that was the
Mm.
rhetoric back then about
Mhm.
alcoholism without tracing it back to trauma as the root.
Mhm.
And so it was this like facade of like, "Oh, he used to drink and we have no problems," or yeah, but then behind closed doors, it was an ongoing issue.
Mhm. So walk us through, because what you've been through is my heart goes out to you, and we're grateful that you're here with us, because I do think that there's beauty in you sharing your mess as your message,
Mhm.
because we're not alone in this. But take us to that moment where maybe you finally decided that enough was enough, or how did you get to the point, because you're doing amazing work now?
Mhm.
What was that turning point for you?
Hey there, darlings! We wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about something super exciting.
That is right, Lisa. And if you're inspired by any of our conversations, but you still feel like you're stuck in place, trapped in guilt and in self doubt, and in the feeling that you are not enough, but you are still yearning for more time, more self confidence, and more fulfillment in your life, this is just exactly for you.
We would like to introduce to you our transformative course, Get Unstuck in 10 Days, in which you'll gain practical steps and knowledge to break through those barriers holding you back and start living the life you truly deserve.
Absolutely, Lisa. Whether you're looking to switch it up, switch your mindset, kick those bad habits to the curb, or set meaningful goals aligned with your values, this course will open new doors just for you.
Plus, by enrolling in Get Unstuck in 10 Days, you'll not only get access to valuable lessons and resources, but also join a supportive community of like-minded individuals on a journey to personal growth and empowerment.
So what are you waiting for? Head over to our website at idecide.io and enroll in Get Unstuck in 10 Days today. Let's make those positive changes together.
And don't forget, darlings, stay tuned for more insightful conversations right here on the I Decide Darlings podcast. Thanks for listening.
Like when I started sharing.
Or when did you say, I have a problem, or bulimia, or I
Mm,
know that drugs and alcohol were
okay.
probably a part of it. So was there a
Yeah.
moment, and again, there was probably many,
Yeah.
but a moment that stands out to you that you say, like, I could go right or I could go left, but I'm going to go right.
Yeah. After I left Houston, I went to New York for school, and it was like Good Girls Gone Wild, and,
Mm,
it wasn't like a normal college campus. It's just like I was let loose out on the city in fashion school and had access to best friends who just, like, had unlimited amounts of drugs, and, like, the culture was just like, go out, get blasted. Like, I was probably drinking to blackout and doing drugs, like, every other day. And, yeah, just, like, being very promiscuous and using my bodies in ways to try and receive love, and it was
mm,
like this never-ending cycle, and I was probably smoking a pack of cigarettes a day,
mm,
and, still my eating disorder was going on, and I think that it wasn't as much of a decision as much as, like, the body speaking to me, which happens to so many people, when I just hit a wall, and there was, like, a certain point that my stomach couldn't even hold food down, and it just, like, bloated, like, distended to, like, 4 times the size and just stayed that way, And my aunt, who's a nurse, she was afraid that I had stomach cancer, and I was just severely depressed. And I had managed to get my hands on Vyvanse, which was like the new Adderall, to control my weight. But that medication made me even more severely suicidal. And it was like a perfect storm. And I started developing ulcer symptoms and finally went to the doctor. And, this is one of those moments that I'm just like, I know that spirit is guiding me because um, I didn't have really good experiences with Western doctors who told me that my bloating was normal and like all of these symptoms were normal. But I actually ended up in Victoria Albina's office. And at the time, she was a nurse practitioner who was working as a PCP, and she was starting to get into holistic medicine. And so she was the first person, I go in, I'm like, just heal my ulcer symptoms, give me pills or whatever, and she was the first person to ask me, what is your relationship like to your father? And there I am, like 21, like shaking in the doctor's office, like, why are you asking me this? Like, nobody has ever asked me this. And what does that have to do with this, And it's funny because she actually does very similar what I do now. She also does somatic coaching and attachment and healing codependency. And she put me on this protocol, and I couldn't drink anymore. I couldn't, do all these things that were consuming probably 70% of my time. And and I also started working with an acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine doctor. And it was this time that felt really disempowering at the time because I'm like, oh, poor me. I can't do drugs. I can't go out anymore. I have to like make all these weird, crazy meals out of like cassava root. And I didn't even know how to cook. And, it was like, it felt at the time like very like, poor me. Like, why is this happening to me? And because it was isolating too, because my social scene was partying. And in that time period, I guess, then I turned to, Gabrielle Bernstein, is that her name? I read Spirit Junkie and then Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And so I was going through this like awakening process, and like living in Brooklyn, New York, where I started to like look at trees and start to sense that there was spirit in there and freaking out, but at the same time still being my like depressed, like spiraling self. And so I guess that was the turn, and I really appreciate running into Victoria at that time in my life.
I'm sure it was no accident. No accident at all. I have a couple of things. First of all, I think it's such I love where our culture is today, where the openness about talking about mental health and depression and things that people are actually going through is a lot more okay. And it does make me sad to hear your story, but also I feel like it also proves how far we've come in the world, because I feel like these conversations are much more open now. Kids at a much younger age are more educated on it. And so I love that so much. And I'm grateful for where you are now. I really am. I'm so happy. And I want to hear about your process. So when you get with a person, a client, whatever you call them, I don't know, what would you call? Do you call them clients or?
Yeah, I guess I call them clients.
Clients. And what is the process? So if our audience, like today, I always like to think about who's listening. And if they're feeling like they're struggling so much on the inside and maybe putting that perfect facade on the outside, but yet they're really struggling, what are the steps that you recommend for them? And how do they get going to help themselves and to be helped?
Like within somatic therapy, and like, say if I were to take in a client.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that my approach is really starting to work with the body and starting to see where are the places that we held a lot of tension and constriction. For example, those moments that I was really excited to show my mom something, and then she shut me down by saying, like, always second place, never first, or something like that. That's one example of like when that huge adrenaline and cortisol revs up and then it gets like shut down, then it actually creates this tension ball like in our body somewhere. And it shows up as like, it could be like difficulty breathing, it could be like heat, or you could describe it as like a spiky ball in the pit of my stomach. Like it comes up in all kinds of these different ways. And I guide clients to learn how to tap into their body's 6 channels of knowing. And most of us have been raised to only understand thought, right? All we do is think, 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 but you actually can't think your way out of trauma. And so this tension ball, for example, is actually creating thoughts, because 80% of messages that go between our vagus nerve from the brain to the body go from the body to the brain, like 80%. Only 20% of messages go from the body to the brain. So if I have this tension ball of like trapped trauma in my body, it's actually sending all of these signals of like alert and not being safe to my brain. And my brain will make up something like, I'm not good enough, or it's not safe to be authentic. It's not safe to use my voice, because it's just trying to protect me from what happened before, right? And so my process is then when we get to learn the 6 channels of knowing in the body, and that's sensations, imagination, movement, emotions, meaning, and sound, then people start to tap into like, oh my God, there's like so much vast intelligence in my body. And I actually have the ability to work through this tension in my body that like, then, you know, like when it's actually released, people will start to feel like tingling coming out and expansion in their chest, like an opening rather than a closing. And then the meaning they start to understand is there's nothing wrong with me. Like, yes, I think that diagnoses are helpful sometimes for people to begin the healing process, but there is a layer of like shame that comes with it. Or, you know, for me, and I've heard from many others, of like, there's something wrong with me if I am labeled borderline or have complex PTSD. And for me, my process is really re-educating about all of these emotions, rage, grief, sadness, everything, as just energy in the body rather than anything bad or wrong. And that these quote unquote negative emotions are actually every bit as holy and important as joy and love and all of the other feel good ones that maybe we were taught that we can only show the good, right? And yeah. And so to me, it's really a process of integrating that knowledge in the body. So then it's no longer like I'm struggling inside, but I have to put on this facade. It's more like I'm struggling and that's okay. And actually everybody else in the world is struggling too. And I'm one part of this wider web. And if when I share this pain in an integrated way, it actually helps someone else. And and that's, I think, what's really important to me.
It's such a good message. I'll tell you, I had one experience in my life that where my body told me before I knew that I was, like you say, keeping these spiky balls, you know, tucked away. And we had multiple deaths close to our family that were all really related to my youngest daughter. Like they were her friends or her friends' parents. And it all happened all at one time. And I was, you know, PTA president that year, and I was trying to keep this thing going. And I was just like, you know, it was really a trauma time. And, and I woke up, get ready for our meeting that morning. And all of a sudden, and you hear people that'll say, you know, I think I had a panic attack, and I had never experienced that before. And I all of a sudden started seeing flashing lights, and I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I'm having a stroke. I took an aspirin. I didn't know. I called my husband, you know, and I sat down on the floor, and the room started spinning, and it was the craziest, realest thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I was like, and I woke up feeling totally healthy, and I went to the hospital. They ran all the tests, and this beautiful doctor came in, woman, and she sat next to the bed, and she said, so you're the healthiest sick person I've ever had here. And she's like, let's talk about what's going on in your life. And I just broke out bawling and bawling, and I couldn't stop crying. This was back when my daughter was about in 6th grade, my youngest daughter, who's now 29. And it was the craziest thing. And so when I hear you talk about your experiences, I think back on that day because it was so real. Everything going on in me, I thought I was dying. I didn't know what was going on, and yet when she sat there next to me on the bed and talked about my stress levels and coping skills, and maybe I should go talk to someone and to help to know how to proceed as a mom during a very sad time for your kids and all this stuff. It was unbelievable. And, so I just think about what you've taught us today, and, how it's so important that we do listen to our bodies, and we face it. And
yeah. Gosh, as you're sharing that, I like notice like, and these are the sensations, like if it's like, oh, I notice like a sinking in my heart and like tears behind my eyes and just like a melting of like compassion. And one, it felt so heartwarming that like this woman doctor, I feel like in the industry, there's not a lot of training on, can I just show up as a human being?
yeah,
Like, can I ask beyond the
yeah.
medical training?
She sat
And
down too. This was something
yeah.
I'll never forget her face. She was beautiful. She sort of looked like Mrs. Obama is what I'm going to explain, because she was a very
Yes.
beautiful woman, and she
Yeah.
put her hand on me,
Oh,
and I'll never forget that moment. And I just bawled and bawled. And my
yes.
husband was sitting next to me on the other side, and he just held my hand. And it was just like this release,
Mhm.
and I wish I knew you then, Tammy. I really do. I wish I knew what you were doing back then. But I honestly think that many of us, like myself in that situation, don't know to watch for the signs,
Yeah,
because there probably was something I could have identified before then that made me realize how much I was keeping inside and trying to just
totally.
move forward as a mom, a strong mom, when
Right,
actually I was crumbling, on the
right.
inside.
Yeah, and, that makes me I think about my mom and, like, the compassion I have for mothers, like, how it's just, like, the hardest job, and how sometimes can we, like, blame moms when it's also a societal systemic thing of, like, really how much has been put on that role, like, not only a lot of times to work, but to raise children and to cook, and, the conversation's better now, but yeah, I just have such empathy for all of the moms and even my own mom when you share
Mhm.
that.
I mean, having this conversation, it does give me anxiety because I am a mom. I've got two teenage girls. And I do think, like Lisa mentioned, we are so much better as a society now to talk about our mental health. And we have so many, famous people who have come out and brought light and ease to that situation. And at the same time, it is so hard as a parent to make sure we're identifying, these things in our kids. And like I said earlier, we don't know what we don't know. I tell my girls all the time, this is my first time too.
Mhm.
Like this is my first time parenting, and parenting two crazy teenage girls too,
Right.
and I think back to, I'm assuming you probably didn't talk about feelings and all of that in your household, that, fast forward now, and, in your household one day, it's like we overshare in the Lopez household, we overshare. But hearing you talk about like the body sensations, I mean, I think it's so important for all of us, the children and the adults, to understand. And I'm thinking now of ways that our body is telling us something, that
Mhm.
you're allowing us to have the voice now to say, wait, this is giving me anxiety right now. So
Mhm.
what can I do about it? So I love that you're sharing that. And am I right? You probably did not talk about your feelings in your household.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't talk unless it would,
Really?
contribute or be helpful. Yeah, and then when you say that, it just brings me back to, like, actually, parenting, because I have been in my own spiral of, like, how will I be a mom? Like, I won't get it right in all these ways, but then so many experts talk about how I think it's like some strangely low percentage, like you only have to get it right 20% of the time or something like that, and it
Yeah.
was, like, more about the rupture and repair process
Mhm.
rather than just needing to do it all right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
you're going to be an amazing mama for these reasons.
Aw.
You know, you
Yeah,
really
you are.
will. And it is so stressful being a mom because thinking, what is my daughter going to say when she's my age, you know, of what I
Right.
did. But, but I also think that we learn so much from our own childhoods that when you, Tammy, become a mom, you're going to be oversharing and you're going to be over every, you know, every aspect of it because of what you've been through. That
Right.
you're, you know, we call it the circle of trust in our household, that when we sit down at our kitchen table, anything goes,
Oh,
you know,
I love
because
that.
we don't want, but that's, you're going to be a great mama. We know
Thank
that. We can say
you.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like such a safe space to be in.
Mhm.
Oh, and crazy and fun all at the same time. How is your relationship with your parents now?
Currently, as of last March, I'm on a little bit of a separating break just because my dog Nala died in January, and it was
Oh.
quite a traumatic experience. And yeah, I think they tried to be helpful in the ways they could, but it did end up in a bit of a blowout where words were exchanged that just were like daggers all over again. And I think with Nala dying, and yeah, it feels strange to say that she felt like my daughter or she felt like my soulmate and my like number one secure attachment partner. You know, like I live on 10 acres of land by myself. Like she is my best friend.
Yeah,
And
I get that.
um
We get that. Don't worry.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And so in that process, there's something about death or catastrophe like that that really made it clear to me what I will and will not tolerate anymore in relationships. And it made it really clear for me to be able to say no, like I will not take this anymore. Um, and it wasn't like I don't want to talk to you again. It was more just I will not engage in relating in these ways. And you can come to me if you feel lonely in these ways, you know. But it's been complicated. And I think maybe, you know, growing up, my mom's favorite thing was stonewalling for like 3 weeks at a time. And we've talked about it. And for her, she was just like, I didn't want to say something I would regret. And for me, I was like tiptoeing around the house, like just running out to get meals for 3 weeks at a time, like terrified. And so I have been in the process of kind of like working with those somatic memories, right? Of like, oh, we just had a blowout, and of course she's going to ignore me, and I'm really tired of doing all the work right now. But I think right now has been time and space for me to like feel like the terror in my body and like the repetitive thought loops of feeling insufficient, unworthy, invisible, invisible. Did I say invisible? um, um, like in the ways that really affected me and the ways that it's showing up in my work and my relationships now. So I wouldn't say it's on bad terms, but I think like just due to the nature of her not knowing how to reach out, or maybe her intentions right now are to give me space. We haven't spoken for a lot of this year.
You're on a little break.
We're on a break, and
You're on a break.
And I expect, you know, at some point it'll reconvene and I'll feel built up in a way that I have the resources to not feel just dragged into all of the history.
Yeah.
I think boundaries are so important, and I admire you for taking that space and that time. I really do. I think a lot of people don't have the strength, the inner strength to do that. They just keep going back to the person that's hurting them, or back to the experience of being around someone. And that's something actually that Aaron and I focused a lot of our time on in our book when we were talking about your circle of influence, and how
I love
sometimes
that.
the hardest thing to do is to remove a person, especially a family member, from your life for a while, even if it's just a short while, or sometimes it needs to be a long while. It just depends. Sometimes it's just really hard to do, but it's so important for your own, just for your own inner health. And so I admire you for doing that, and I hope that it gets worked through, just for your, you know, for your parents' sake. I hope, because they're missing out, is the way I look at it when I meet you and talk to you. But I also hope for you too, so that you have that connection restored in a really healthy way. But I'm glad that you're handling it the way you are. I think that's very smart.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Tammy, I'd love to hear. No, you finish because that was
I
really.
was I was just going to say something because that circle of influence, I love that because in my attachment work with people, part of our work is actually teaching someone how to orient towards a healthy, like secure attachment rather than running back to kind of what feels like a heroin drip of like what you're used to as love. And so then, like in the attachment work, it's sort of like, oh, what did that feel like when I met your need right now? And like guiding them towards like, okay, well, actually, it feels like there was like one molecule of opening in my chest, and like telling them, like, oh, you don't have to feel it all at once. Where's that one molecule? And then the more and more they stay with that, it might like expand. And so it's almost like downloading this new feeling in people's bodies of what secure attachment feels like, so that then when they go out in the world and they start having people come to them, I think like I see God in all of our relationships. Like they're always sending us people as our mirrors. They're more able to be like, oh, that feels like that sense of safety that I felt, and then start to orient more and more to be able to go to those relationships, like the circle of influence, like you said, which is kind of how I've been able to create this distance, because I've found just like a wonderful family, like chosen family of support to orient to, where I'm not bad or wrong, and that I feel actually supported.
Well, and the family element is something that we see a lot with people that we work with. The family element is the hardest because it's like an expectation to be
Yeah.
around the family at Thanksgiving or at Christmas time or whatever holidays you're celebrating, Easter.
Mhm.
And it's like this expectation. But actually, if you are somewhere with people that when you leave that room, you feel drained and sick and tired and they just sucked the life out of you, then they're the wrong people, whether they're your family or not.
Right.
And if you leave and you're like, you feel lighter and happier, and for me, at my age, I just feel like I finally am allowing myself to make those decisions for myself and to say no to things I don't want to do, because I used to, out of obligation, and
Mhm.
I'm not specifically talking about my family in this situation, but people in my life that I felt an obligation to before to spend time with, I don't feel that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm at this like power strength moment where I'm just like, no, I don't want to do that, because when I leave that person, I feel icky inside,
Totally.
and
Right.
so I hope that people can listen to this and get empowered, not to leave people behind, but to make choices,
Yeah.
choices that will heal their body versus hurt their body.
Right. Conserve their energy. Start to choose how they use their energy. Maybe if we're giving somebody 80% and they're consistently draining us, we only give them 20.
Yes, I love that.
You're so knowledgeable about what you're offering to people and like your journey. Before we leave though, I want to hear like your somatic spirit journey that you're having with others. So you're using your journey and now you're doing one-on-one coaching, you're doing group coaching. Like tell us so our audience can hear a little bit about that too.
Yeah. So my one-on-one journey is a 3-month journey where we meet once a week. And I'm basically starting to teach clients about the 6 channels of knowing in their body. And through that process, like I've had clients describe it before. They're like, oh my God, you need to like have people sign a waiver that this is like a psychedelic experience. Because when we start tapping into our imagination channel, like we get to be in touch with all kinds of resources that could be made up. It could be like a dragon. It could be like, alternate life kind of things in like the astral realm. And so it's really like a journey of like what their guides and what their senses through those channels are bringing up in session. And I feel like my role is simply, I say, like, part of my prayer before each session is like, I'm simply the conduit through which like energy reorganizes itself. So I'm just sitting there like, and I have like an sense of, or an idea of like fight, flight, fawn, freeze responses that need to be moved through the body. And then I also just pick up on just like intuition or messages that are coming through. And I'm not about being like, oh, I'm hearing this from your guides, here is what it is. I'm like, there's something happening, and I wonder what's like happening in your body and if it like has words. And so it always comes through my clients. And so I'm basically leading them back into embodiment in themselves on this 3-month journey. And in the process, it is a lot of like going, when we tap into the sensations and emotions and all that, it brings up core memories that we actually can rework with all of these resources like dragons or, just people in our lives that could have been there, and then like start to unblock that energy and have that move through. And so that process is like really dedicated one-on-one support to really help women learn to feel their boundaries, be able to name it, to be able to like find sovereignty in themselves, and also to like learn and kind of like break free from this like authority model that we've been taught, like that we need all of these certifications, we need to look a certain way, we need to be a certain size, we need to like do all of these things as a woman in order to be fucking worthy. And so it's really a process back to like ourselves, our authenticity, and our just innate worth. And that kind of bleeds over as well into Awakening the Wild Woman. But it's a group experience with options to meet with me one-on-one as well. But what that has in addition is this community aspect. Like, I feel like it's my black sheep girlies, like all of us weirdos that are like doing the work out here. But sometimes I feel like I'm like shouting in the dark. And, of course, those like same feelings and thoughts from growing up in a family that didn't understand me are there. And it could feel really lonely. And so it's like a very deep sisterhood of like a 6 months of journeying together through like witness somatic experiencing, body temple dance, poetry, art, writing. And I bring in different experts that are that teach us women's embodiment through like rage process, grief ceremonies, womb wisdom, exploring authentic voice and sound healing, and really get to just experience life together in those 6 months. And the things that have happened in like the past container are just incredible, like from us getting to hold space for each other when a parent dies, or we leave a toxic relationship and then manifest like a secure relationship, or like we're in a really toxic job that requires us to work night shifts like 3 days in a row, but then shift into like owning our voice and knowing their worth and being able to get a job that values their time and their well-being. And it's like just so beautiful to get to watch all of these women journey through this process together. And I really think that community is kind of the missing piece in a lot of our healing journeys.
I love that. I do believe in the community. I think that is so needed. It just the thought that people are out there right now and they feel alone, that just scares me to death. We don't want anyone to feel alone in today's world. We just don't. We need that. So you're doing a beautiful thing. I can't wait to share this information. I've got a person I really want to connect with you for sure. And I know that there's many out there listening that could really use that community and that time with you. So Tammy, thank you for being with us today. I think you are wonderful, and I'm sorry for what you've been through, but I'm grateful for where you are and what you're doing to serve others and to help them get through these tough trauma experiences that have happened and that are happening. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Erin. This was so fun.
Oh, it was fun. And Tammy, we're proud of you. Like we're so proud of you. Like there's that mama, and I know both of us that want to be able to say to you, like, we're so proud of you. You could have gone down a different path and not ever spoken about this and not ever chosen the path that God gave you to help others. So from your darling mamas, we are very proud of you.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. I will keep that in my heart.
Well, we will have everything in the show notes. We want them to find your website. We didn't even mention the podcast. There is a podcast. We want them to go check out as well. So we'll have all of that. But Tammy, you're amazing. You're awesome. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us today on I Decide Darlings. Share this out. Make sure you send it to someone you love. And as always, thank you for joining us on the I Decide Darlings podcast. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
You've been listening to the I Decide Darlings podcast. If this podcast touched your heart, please share it with your friends and family right after you subscribe yourself.
Don't forget to head over to iDecideBook.com and grab a copy of our favorite book and daily journal. As always, thank you for being here, and we can't wait for you to hear our next episode.